All right, and welcome back to another Conquest Corner. For this particular, what should be quite a short episode, when I put out the video for the Nords, or why to start playing the Nords, one of our commenters there mentioned that when we talk about Wadrun, which, depending on timing, you might have either just watched or this one came down first, they're essentially both being recorded pretty much almost the same time, a different day, as you could tell. But one of them mentioned that, hey, when you go over this, could you discuss a little bit more depth about the drum beast and the Tontorr, maybe a little more comparison, and I guess to get a little bit better feel about these brand new models that they put out for the game. So that's exactly what this video is going to be. So in this video, we're going to discuss both. We're going to go through a bit of the rules, how they work, ways I see them, a little bit of comparison, maybe which one, if you're only running one, would there ever be a case where you actually want to run two of these things? And oddly enough, if you were looking to want to run two right now, at least as we are in the Christmas season, it's actually Black Friday as of recording of this. They are actually running a sale for both with some other resin bases and all. So if you actually wanted them, you can get them in a little bit more for a little bit cheaper than you would naturally. Remember, for anything you're looking at for Conquest, we do have a code. It's down in the YouTube comments below. Actually, sorry, it's in the notes, not in the comments. So if you're looking to pick up something up for Conquest and you want to save yourself 10% and also help us out a bit, code's right there for you to be able to use. So without further ado, let's take a look at these guys then. So as we said, the goal is to discuss these two, the newest of the models that they have right now, or at least large models. Technically, after this, they did release the riders separately, but I'm not so worried about that. So first things first in discussion of these guys, I want to make sure we understand how they can be taken. So the Tontorr can be taken either by Chieftain, a Predator, whether they're mounted or not, as well as the Thunder Chief, which makes sense. Essentially, if you are on foot or not currently, there hasn't really been much in terms of change related to your standard options, your restricted options, essentially what you're allowed to take. There's a little spots where there's some differences, but nothing here so far. If it's the Drum Beast, you're looking at the Matriarch or the Scion of Conquest. So let's talk about a little each of these, and then we'll especially talk about who can go on them and all of that. So they are both monsters. They are both heavy. If you've seen these things, I've seen them in pictures. The person I know who's building one, he hasn't put it all together quite yet, or at least maybe it's together. It's not painted yet, so it hasn't showed up in the store. But they are, of course, giant. They are coming in at 310 for the Tontorr, 330 for the Drum Beast. So you are spending a lot of points. These are some of the most expensive, if not the most expensive models in the game. A lot of the other monsters, some monsters get expensive, but even Fallen Divinity isn't quite this level at those points. Obviously, your units can get a lot more expensive depending on what you take. For things that are the same stats-wise, they're both move 6, so both reasonably slow. They have a volley of 2, not that it really matters. They have a clash base of 2, although they both have a rule, the March of Giants, which makes you always inspired, so more realistically a clash of 3. Both have no evade, unsurprising. They both have a resolve of 3 with a defense of 3, so decent defense. They can't avoid a hit. It makes sense. They're brontosauruses. And the other thing where they're the same is the fact they're both 26 wounds. So an exceptionally high amount of wounds. Where they differ is only one stat, that's the amount of attacks. The Drum Beast, which is a little bit more support-based, has 12 attacks. The Tontorr instead has 16. So a little bit more combat-oriented. Let's talk about some special rules that they have. Again, we're going to start with the things that are the same and then talk about what's different. Essentially, they both have 11 special rules. There's one that's different for both of them. Both of them have impact 6, so they get 6 hits when they come charging in with a brutal impact of 2. With their clash numbers, not going to be a huge amount of hits, but with the brutal impact of 2, if you don't have a good evade, then they'll actually get some damage onto those people. They naturally both have a cleave of 1, so they're reducing your armor by 1. So we're going to see they're not necessarily great at very heavy armored foes, but anything that's not hitting that highest category, they're going to do reasonably well against. They both have Trample 10. In case you're not familiar with it, I did discuss in the other Wadrun video, but this is a reasonably new rule in terms of units that you actually now see with it. What Trample is at the end of the activation for that regiment, if they're still in contact with the enemy in its front arc, because you're pushing forward from your front, then each stand causes X additional hits, where X is the amount of trample. So at the end, if the enemy's still there and they're in your front arc, you get 10 automatic hits on them. It says it does not benefit from any other special rules. Other special rules would be things even like your cleave and stuff like that. Because remember, that's only in clashes. This isn't a clash. But essentially, you get 10 auto hits on someone. No matter what their defense is, even if their defense is, say, a 4, you're still rolling it. You're still failing a few. But you might roll very poorly and fail quite a few. But otherwise, you're still failing on average 3 to maybe 4 of them. So you're removing the better part of a stand, if not a stand as well at the end. Which I've had plenty of cases when I go in and hit, say, with my Cataphracti or some other unit like that, and I deal you damage, and either I don't break you by a stand, or I don't finish you off by about a stand. And this means when they're all said and done, they have a chance to be able to hit someone at the end to take them out as well. They're, of course, fearless, which is great. They're too big to care. Towering presence, as it says, they count as size 4. So there's almost nothing in this game that are going to be hidden behind, and you should be able to see them no matter what train you're bringing. They also have Bellowing Roar. Bellowing Roar is the rule that is given to the monsters in the Wadroon army. It just means that they are Cult of Conquest. They get the benefits from it, and they may use the War Chant ability. They may only chant from the Cult of Conquest. So they get related to Conquest, and they have that. All right, they are Oblivious. 1 wound for every 2 failed morale tests rounding up. So their defense out of 3 is good, but with no evade, that means there's definitely things that can get in and do a good amount of damage to them. But with a resolve base of 3 and Oblivious means that you're not going to really take much resolve damage. And they have March of Giants. That's the rule that makes them always inspired. So that's sort of the packet of rules and the ways in which we think about these guys as being very the same. And we'll get into their differences here in a second. So when we look at these guys, they come in, they're hitting for 6 impact. You'll get, say, 2 to 3 of those. At Brutal Impact 2, you'll hopefully get a few wounds on it. Oddly enough, they don't cause terrifying. They're not terrifying in either case. I'm a little bit surprised by that, but maybe they thought just had too many rules. But you'll get a couple wounds on them, maybe get a few through, maybe fail a little bit in terms of that resolve. Then you have either 10 or 16 attacks. Important key to note, like I said, the Tontorr is a little more combat oriented. The Tontorr has Relentless Blows. So any of those ones are 2 successes. So you could potentially get quite a few more hits than that 16. But you get those hits, you do have Cleave 1. So again, as long as they're not great evade or, really good armor with a shield, with hardened, all these sorts of special rules. So Dwagholm might be the spot where they struggle a little bit. But otherwise, you're going to get a decent amount of wounds onto someone. They're going to have Resolve at the end. Hopefully a couple more wounds there. And then you still have your Trample. There's 10 more auto hits. And again, unless you're, say, defense 4 or something like that, you are going to take even more off of that. So they have lots of ways to deal a good amount of damage to people. That doesn't mean they take out any regiment size no matter what, or depending on the enemy. But if you happen not to have great stats, let's say they're going against someone who's like, base resolve to defense 2. You can even give them an evade of 1 or maybe even 2 if you want. If you say you give them evade of 2, that means for the hits coming in, they'll have 2s on that. So that means they're going to fail 2/3 of them. Their resolve, even if they have enough to get a +1, they're failing half of those resolves. You're coming in with 12 or 16 attacks. You have that Trample at the end. If they're on saving on 2s, which is not unheard of, you're going to get a decent amount of that, even if they're on 3s. They're still taking 5 there at the end. That's still a stand for most of the things you want to run into. We want to assume that these things are charging in because, one, you have some trouble if they're not. Maybe we'll talk a little strategy with that in a moment. But you want to be charging in, which means we'll assume that you're getting some of your extra bits as well, that you're going to get your impacts as well. So for spots where they're different, we mentioned the Relentless Blows for the Tontorr. So he, depending on how you roll, could get a whole lot more hits. The thing for the Drum Beast, so it's still quite deadly, still 12 attacks, which is still a lot of attacks. Some other big monsters in this game top out around numbers like that, or maybe even a little less. The big thing is it has the sound of the drums. As long as it's on the battlefield, your regiments are not obligated to chant the battle cry. It becomes optional. So, we taught in our Why to Play Wadroon video, which again, these are coming out around the same time, so depending on which one you watch first, that the way this works is normally when there's 3 cards in the stack and it's a regiment that activates, they must chant the battle cry, which means they must set the cards off. What the drumbeat says is you don't have to do that. Now, there is still limits on how many cards are in the stack, because that is a base rule, and that's a separate rule from the chanting the battle cry. You need that separate rule because characters can't chant battle cries. They can put down markers, but not the battle cry itself. But what this means is you can be a little less concerned about the way you order your stack. So remember, you choose before the round starts the order of which you're going to go. The problem with Wadrun, or the difficulty with Wadrun, is you're not only thinking about when the unit wants to go, but how many markers you're going to have down, and at what point are you going to be forced to essentially chant the battle cry. Can I want, my unit of veterans, I really need them going second, but I have 2 cards in my stack, and what's going to go first is going to make the battle cry go off, but I really need to get this other unit out of the way first. I need my Raptor Riders to push up and to get into their calves so I don't get side charged and all of that, and they don't need the bonus. All these sorts of things start coming to play when you have Wadrun. The drumbeat says you don't have to worry about playing that game at all. So his utility here, especially if you're, say, a somewhat newer player and you really love dinosaurs, so you wanted to pick one of these big boys up anyway, this definitely lowers the learning curve by a lot. I would still say when you're doing it that you want to be practicing as if you had to set it off, or thinking that as well a little bit, just so you can get used to where you're putting things, what cards should go when, but then you don't have to worry about that fact. So he is a little bit less in terms of attack. However, his consistency to me does a lot of good here. 4 less attacks isn't that really that big. That's not much of a difference. You're talking about 2 hits on average difference. The Relentless Blows is hard to attach a value to because actually just earlier today, Dan and I were hanging out and he was playing a game of 30k, and on 6 dice he rolled 5 ones. If this was this game, he just got an extra 5 hits. But you could also roll a bunch of dice and get nothing extra. You don't happen to roll ones, it doesn't do you any good. So the Tontorr absolutely outclasses the Drumbeast in terms of combat. But I think the Drumbeast overall, for what it does from bit to bit, I think, if you played 50 games with each, in terms of fighting ability, I don't think you'll see the Tontorr go so crazy above that the other one can't keep pace decently. I think that's the same exact reason why the Drumbeast is 30 more points. So they're either 310 or 330. Drumbeast is more, because I think that ability is rated more highly than a very situational ability. Don't get me wrong, Relentless Blows is great. I have it on some units. Well, in particular, I really only have it on one unit, but Bone Golems have it. But it can be a little bit hit and miss. All right, so we talked about the things that can take them. So if we think about the Tontorr, like we said Chieftain, Predator, or the Thunder Chieftain, obviously another type of Chieftain. As we'll notice for all of these guys, it's restricted, so you're going to have to take some other things. In general, you need to take something for them to ride on, or to be with. Although the Tontorr can be ridden by the Chieftain, and the Drumbeast can be ridden by the Scion. So when we take a look at those, where that comes from, if you take a look at the masteries, Apex Master is how you hop on the Apex Predator. Tontorr Rider is how you hop on either Tontorr/Drumbeast. And as it says, it's 5 points, so it's very, very cheap. The mastery can be purchased as many times as you want. Character Stand can now ride Tontorrs. It has to be a Chieftain to be able to ride the Tontorr, and the Scion of Conquest to be able to ride the Drumbeast. For what it gives you, they said you can purchase many times, it tells you what it does, and then you get the rule of Tontorr Rider. Now, this is a very long rule, but it boils down to the way most riders do. It's near the end where it can get a little bit different, but the beginning part is, if for all intents and purposes, you were a separate stand, you're now part of that monster, you are part of its regiment, you count as part of its warband, all of that. It counts as being composed of 2 stands, monster and that character. It uses the monster stands for purposes of measuring distance, line of sight, all of that. The character is still there. The character always counts as in base with the regiment that the monster's fighting. Therefore, you can challenge and be challenged. You can fight in combat, all of that. You use the monster's march characteristic instead of lowest. The character's not allowed to leave for any reason. You're not allowed to seek new escort or anything like that. You are stuck there. Should the monster go down, you go down as well. You can't be pulled off separately or anything like that. You could still go down in duels, but if the monster goes down, you go down as well. The monster regiments get to reroll defense rolls of 6. So we talked about how they're defense 3. If you are not cleaving through them at all, or brutal impacting through them, or anything like that, that means they're on 3s rolling 6s. So they're a bit more reliable than 50%. The character stand gains you and one army special rule. For you and one army, it says the fact that they don't become broken if the character declines a duel. Now, on the monster, we understand that broken out can do a few other things, but they won't break. So if you don't want to fight, and yeah, a Chieftain or Scion of Conquest is a combat-oriented character, but there's many reasons why you wouldn't want to fight. Maybe you don't want to deck them out with enough gear to really be able to do the fighting. Maybe whatever came into you is a lot scarier, so no, don't bother fighting. In addition, so the Scion of Conquest attached to a drum beast gains the drumbeat draw event. A Chieftain attached to the Tontorr has its ways of war no longer affect the regiment the character is currently attached to. Rather, the Chieftain may select a friendly regiment within 8 to gain the effect until the end of the round. It takes place in a resolve at steps. So let's talk about what that drumbeat does. So you add 1 chant marker that matches any cult of any chant marker already in the sequence. So the idea is the Scion of Conquest is up there, he's hitting the drum. So you can see whatever's already there. When he goes, you get to put down whatever one you want. And notice, it is a draw event. So your normal placement rules here. Now, this is rules as are written currently. There's always a chance Parabellum Games FAQ something changes it. So as of right now, in almost December, this is accurate. But your Scion goes. You put down whatever mark that he has in his warband. Remember, the warband has to all have 1 mark, whatever that warband has. So you put down the mark for the warband. Then he does his draw event. When he does his draw event, you can put down what you like from there. So if we take a look at Scion of Conquest, I want him next to a Chieftain. We look at Scion of Conquest. Obviously, you can choose any of those. Notice, he does not have any draw events. Now he will. So he'll be able to put down 1 extra copy of something that's already there. And with that drum beast means that when the next thing goes, 1, if you have him go early, you can stack your deck more and you can be ready to go. Or you can get it ready, delay it using the fact that the drum beast is there, and then set it off for someone else. Remember, the drum beast himself is also going to put a card of conquest down. So especially if you want to run, honestly, any of the types, it's very easy to get those 3 marks then with these 2 models. Really, 2 models, but 2 models sitting together as 1. For the Chieftain, it mentioned that his ways of war, if you notice his ways of war here, he either gets rapid displacement, double time, or violence of action, flurry. He can't give the Tontorr flurry. That's good. That honestly would be a bit too much, all things considered, if you could do that as well. So luckily, you can't quite do that, because it does specifically say here, it no longer affect that they're attached to, rather a friendly regiment within 8 to gain. Oh, you're friendly to yourself. Okay, there was a pause there in the video because I came up with a question there that you can kind of hear me leading into as I said it, and I wanted to go and ask actually one of the rules designers or about it. So in the Tontorr Rider rule, it talks about how the way of war ability no longer affects the regiment the character stands attached to. Rather, the chieftain may select a friendly regiment within 8 to give it to them. So before, it was essentially a special rule that was always on. Now it's a draw event that the chieftain has. So it can affect the Tontorr that he's on. However, the chieftain would have to go first, before the Tontorr goes, do his draw event of way of war. Then when the Tontorr goes, he can get whatever sort of bonus you give. So that's very important to take a look at, because remember, rapid displacement, double time. So you can give this to the Tontorr. So if you do 2 marches, you get a free additional march. That first round, you're not allowed to charge anyway when you come on. So what you're hoping for in a case like this, you're hoping that you probably maybe don't come in. I mean, yes, you could come up turn 3, and turn 3 with the extra move probably isn't as bad, but you might want turn 4, because turn 4 now you can come in from reserve off of the sides, so you can flank sorry, I should say you come in from the flank. Now you have 18 inches from there. You can position yourself just about anywhere you would want to go. So you absolutely on that first turn get a lot of movement. You might need it later as well, but at least that first turn. It also helps in case where you come in is on one side. The opponent, you defeat them on that side, and now they're on the far side. Being able to move that 18, you can actually reach them. Because otherwise, I find sometimes my big heavy unit hits someone, and then it's going to be, oh man, the game's almost over by the time they get to somewhere else, just because they kind of overwhelmed. The other thing then you can give that Tontorr is flurry. So if we think about for them right now, let's talk a little bit about potential output then. And then we'll talk about whether this is a good idea or not. But if you just want to talk about pure potential output, so you are looking at 16 attack dice. You are going to be on a clash of 3 because you're always inspired, so you should be hitting 8. Of those that miss, again on averages, you're going to hit about 4, so you should get about 12 hits. In that 12 hits, you should statistically have about 2 or so ones. So you're actually looking at closer to about 14. Now, again, this can sway quite quickly. If you happen to have a good turn, you could be much, much higher. But if you have a bad turn, it could be less. But you're looking about, 14 is a pretty good number to look at there. If we're taking a look at having this guy with, say, flurry. Depending on the defense that you're facing, you're cleave 1. Let's assume you were facing 2 with a shield, which means they're back down to 2, which means that they're going to fail 2/3 of that 14. So I want to make sure I have the actual percentages and all here. So it's about 9.3. Let's round it just to 9. So they should be taking about 9 wounds. They're then going to be taking 9 resolve. If we assume resolve, I think it's probably best to assume sitting at a 3, depending on the size, because even if they're a little bit lower, they might have the 4 or more stands, so they might have bump up, or they have a character in there. Again, if someone has a great resolve, maybe you don't target them. But through the resolve, you should get about another half or so. That's about, off of this, a bit over 4.5, so you're probably looking at closer to 5, because on average, you're doing a little bit more than 9. So you're looking on this thing to be doing 12 to 13 wounds, somewhere in that sort of ballpark. That's 2 to 3 stands, depending on exactly what you're hitting. You did impact in, which will get you a few, and those tramples at the end, even if you now are facing someone at defense 3, you're now looking at 5 more coming in. So you're looking at a reliable on that Tontorr 20 or more wounds that it can put out. Again, it could spike much, much higher. It could spike lower, but it could spike much, much higher. For the Drum Beast, you're looking at a bit less since it doesn't have that sort of reroll and its ones, or doesn't have any option of reroll, and its ones can't cause the extras, and also less attacks. You're probably looking at more consistent between all of it in the 10 sort of ballpark. I would think, again, it could go way higher, way lower. So you're obviously already looking at more damage for the Tontorr. Do I put a character on it? Me, for the moment, I would in the beginning. I think for fun. I think it is more fun with the character on it. I think they add quite a bit to it. I think the Chieftain being able to put their ability out to other units, not even if you want it on the Tontorr, but maybe you want it on flurry or the extra move on someone else out of 8. I think you can do that. I think it does a lot of good. We talked about that side. So would I put him on it? I think I would, but if I put him on it, I wouldn't put much on him at all. I would probably try to keep him pretty cheap. Artifact-wise, I'm not sure I would go that much, just because you're already getting very expensive. You're already above 400 points. Bloodhorn, if you want to have a really good bubble, not a bad idea. Again, you're getting super, super expensive, but I do find sometimes you have an extra spare 40, 50 points in the game. So that's not necessarily a terrible idea. You can get 2 more impact if you want. I don't think it's worth it unless you had 20 points and you literally couldn't do anything else with it. Other things that you might want to do. No, can't do any of that. Oh, beast drums. So not for that one, but for the Scion, if you really do, well, it's just the character, so I'm not even worried about that. Flurry's nice on the character, but it's too expensive when you put them on there. I don't think you're really up and up and up. That's on the character stand. Not that much in terms of some of these that I would put on him. They're going to help him more. And if I put him on a Tontorr or even the Scion, if I'm putting him On the drum beast, I want him because of what I'm putting him on, not so much him. Obviously you're not allowed to take a retinue, so we know not even bother looking at those. So I'm not quite as concerned. He does have cleave, which is nice, and again, maybe you put a little something on him. We take a look at the Scion of Conquest. So this is your caster. He's a priest 4. He has cleave too, so he actually has a really good cleave. He has his set of spells that you could use. So when we take a look at his spells that he has, Crescendo is always very nice because if it goes off, you get a conquest marker, you reveal your next command card, and if it's regiment, you draw it and they activate. Which means you could have the Scion there. You using his drumbeat ability that he now has while on this beast means that you could put down the card. You match a card that you already have. Then you could cast this. You can get a conquest chant marker, and then you could pull, say, the drum beast that you have. And now he has another marker, which means you can get off pretty much, tier 2 of anything you want. Something I didn't mention for the other one, but one of the artifacts, probably the only artifact you would actually take if you wanted to take an artifact at all, is Mental Devoted, which makes you Fanatic, which means now you can get those tier 3 bonuses. So I do think that's a potential play as well. But again, you're chasing so many points. Like, will it do a lot of good? Yes. Are you spending, a fifth of your army to do it? Yeah, and more so. So you get a lot, but you're spending a whole lot for that. So honestly, I don't mind the characters on it. I do think it's a fun option. If you're playing for fun, throw them on there. Have fun. If you are trying to play it to be good with it, I think it's too many points. It's too many eggs in one basket. It's a basket that you're a bit delayed on when it can come in, potentially delayed on how much good it can do for a little while because you can't charge from off the board. You can't come in from the flanks on turn 3. You have to come from the back. So maybe you're holding them out till turn 4. Now they're not really doing anything till turn 5. Yeah, heavies don't tend to do you that much early. But if I'm going to spend, 400 plus points, potentially almost 500 points on them if I want to put a little bit of upgrades on these guys, then I think you're almost chasing far too many points for that. As your opponent, I would love to see you spend a quarter of your list on one thing that moves 6 inches. That is very scary if it gets there, but yeah, I'm going to put some chaff units in the way. Or there are things that take them down. If something has a good cleave, has at least a cleave of 2, that means it has almost no save whatsoever. It does have tons of wounds, but if it has almost no save, you're going to get a lot through. If you can get the charge off instead, which means it's not getting impacts, and then if you can get to maybe not necessarily even in the front, if you're along the side or something, yes, it can reform, but that's what it's going to have to do to take those tramples. And now it's exposing another side. You're going to have to throw a sizable amount at this thing probably to take it down. But you could also just feed it smaller things just to get in its way. You hit a 3-pack of, I say 2 defense, whatever guys, depending on which faction you want to talk about. That's fine. Killed like 120, 130 points. And that was your whole round. And while you're doing that, I'm sitting on objectives. Or while you're doing that, I'm taking different points. Or I'm fighting down the rest of your army. Or I'm shooting you from a distance and starting to slowly plink your wounds down so that we can throw a heavy unit at you. There absolutely is units that could take them out even in one go. It's not impossible. It can be very, very tough. But that's not necessarily even your goal. If you can get them to activate, get anywhere close to you, and you can get a couple units charged in, you really could do a whole lot of damage to them. For other options, obviously, you have Matriarch Queens who can both, as we saw with her, she can take the Drum Beast or the Tontorr. She actually takes both. My apologies. I don't think I mentioned her before that she takes both. She absolutely does take both. But with her taking both, you could take either. She has ways to heal, so you get a little more survivability out of them. Just some more options that you have. Yeah, I don't think I mentioned that she actually takes both. The other ones do not, though. The Drum Beast is a little bit harder to get. So I think that's an option. So for these guys, let's say you take them. First of all, which one do you do? Obviously one. You could take either. Like I said, if we're playing a game and this isn't for some big tournament, because they would care. If it's not for a tournament, buy whichever one you have. Just run as whichever one you want. Who cares? Have fun. Which one would I run? Me personally, I like the Drum Beast a little more. I think the Tontorr is obviously more damaging and it has a much higher upside in terms of damage, but that's not my concern in Wadrun. Wadrun have a lot of ways to get a lot of good damage out. And it's not that Drum Beast underperforms so drastically. It could. If all the dice go perfect, yeah, the Tontorr is going to slaughter anyone it gets to. But the Drum Beast is going to do a lot, and on average, it's not going to do that much less. It will cost me a little bit more, but that Sound of the Drums ability is really, really useful. Being able to set things off when I want is big. So as where I am right now, that to me is a little bit more of what I want. When I'm more, say, comfortable with that army, or if I really kind of shave my list to a particular spot, then maybe I swap it. Because also for me personally, I kind of like the matriarch. Although, I mean, a chieftain for leading would be good, but I'm a little bit bigger fan personally of the matriarch. She can take a little bit of both, so I kind of like her a little bit more with that drum beast, because this is an ability I want for longer. It helps out. The Scion as well, I think, is a really good piece to have. They said that combination of being able to do his power or his spell, pulling out the card, essentially activating him, then activating the drum beast right afterwards, I think is really good. You can get some more of your order cards down, so you can guarantee that you're getting the effect that you need. So me personally, I'm probably a little bigger fan of the drum beast, though I won't lie, the more I talk about it, the more I kind of do like the Tontorr as well. And again, it's not a case of me not liking him. I think this is an army that can put out a lot of punishment. Your Thunder Riders and all that can put out a lot of punishment. So I want utility, and that does a little more utility, while still being able to do a lot of damage. I think that just about does it for the comparison of these two. So overall, pretty fair. All right, there's a little bit of a pause there because I had to go take care of something. And honestly, at the same time, I then kind of look at it. If you heard click clacks, that was my dog walking by. I think I still like the drum beast more, but the Tontorr is really, really good. And I keep going back and forth. Like I said, I think this is an army that I like the utility a little bit more than the pure damage output. But that's just me and for what I would want personally. I think both are very comparable. I think points-wise, they're probably just about right. I do think the drum beast probably should be a little bit more expensive because he lets you take your rule and kind of apply it as you want, which I think is absolutely huge. You can almost guarantee that you have the bonuses that you want at any time, which, those battle cries, when you have them go off, can absolutely be game changers, especially if you can get to the fanatic level. Being able to save it for one of your chosen units to be able to get their big buff that they want is huge. So playing them in general, for playing either of these, I think, you want to take whatever support pieces you need. I do think, again, we talked about how you could run a bunch of dinosaurs. I think that's absolutely valid. If you're not running a whole bunch of dinosaurs, I think you want units with some speed and some other, especially for the drum beast, units that can really take advantage of being able to put down the battle cry when you want. So you might be able to go, you might want to shy away from very heavy other points related units, but you could think of him as one of your big heavy units and at least one other large one, and then you can kind of put them where you want in the stack, not being worried about when you're going to get your ability, and you will get it exactly when you want. So you can get, say, Hold of Conquest because they'll need the extra movement, or oh, they're broken, I can guarantee that they unbreak at the time when they show up, whatever that may be for some of the bigger charges. No matter which one I'm running, I'm seeing them as my heavy. I definitely want to make sure I get some lights because I want to be able to start getting some board presence early. I also want to be able to make sure that I have a decent amount of things to score with. A lot of these missions have multiple score zones. This guy, either one, would be an imposing figure in a score zone. However, you're giving a lot of maneuverability up. And again, since it's a big heavy target, you're either putting down something your opponent is going to be ignoring, or it's going to be dedicated heavy towards. If they're ignoring it, then I can park this guy somewhere, start scoring me some points, and start pushing them around a little bit. Which means I want some units, not necessarily lights, because obviously they don't score, maybe good contesting. I might need to be able to contest in a few spots because they're going to be more heavily fortified in other locations. Or some other decent mediums/heavies to be able to get the points out or be able to, push their way into wherever the enemy is kind of huddling up. So you could use them to kind of funnel, almost like a herding dog to an extent. If they're trying to dedicate a lot of resources at it, few things happens. Either one, let them. If they're going to throw unit after unit after unit into it, so not that they're throwing them in the way that you're having to take down, but they're actually going to throw tons of these units into it, I would keep something back with them, something that could keep an eye on them. Maybe a unit of Raptor Rider, something that's nice and fast. Maybe a unit of, either, let's see, slingers might not be a bad idea. In terms of being able to take some shots there, they could shoot, kind of pull back. You could have a countercharge unit, one of your chosen, the veterans, a warbred. So when they hit you, you hit them back, wipe out their units. That frees up your beast to push forward, or just let them. They'll throw tons of resources at it. With 26 wounds, even if they put a really ideal unit, it's still going to take some time. It's not going to be immediate. And depending on what they throw, you might be able to take it down as well. So you can make them pay both in terms of time, point commitment, and damage for taking you down. If you can delay them for enough turns, that can be good enough. I've had cases where my Cataphracti, they go into someone and they just hang out for 3 turns. And you know what? That's 3 turns that you have 1 to 2 units not doing the things that you need them to do. That becomes a win. And the way I take them, they're this cost or more. Or very close, I should say. So if I'm playing them, that's what I'm doing. We talked last time in the other video some list ideas, and I could always throw a few of those into the notes if people have suggestions. What I'm more curious about is people who do play them, who do have this army, what sort of list they put them in. I'm also especially curious is, do you put the characters on it, or is that just too expensive? If you're playing against them, because I think it's important to discuss that as well. I think you have both the other things. I don't think you can just truly ignore it. I don't think you can ignore them because they can cause too much disruption. So I think, again, you could try to play away. Personally, I think that's a mistake. I'm not saying you play into them, but I don't think you should try and play fully away from them, because then you're kind of pushing yourself towards one side. Your opponent now can kind of consolidate the way in which they're attacking you, which would be a bit of a disadvantage. Or they now have a board state, at least one part of it, where you don't really have much of a presence, which means they have a better time being able to get the points over on that side. And since this is a points game, if I can score more points there and I'm contesting at minimum some of the points on your side, I'm going to slowly, potentially quickly, but at least slowly tick my way forward. I think you either commit or you go into a feeding strategy. The feeding strategy is simple. You take the cheap units you have and get them in the way. These guys are move 6. Even if you take the Tontorr with the Chieftain who can triple move, even considering rotations and things like that, these guys aren't exceptionally fast. So you're looking at probably turn 4 to 5 where you really have to start being concerned. Which means if I have a somewhat cheap unit that's going to be in their way, or at least I can get into the way. Now, if they have a lot of speed, I can guarantee they're in the way. If not, when you look at the board state, you probably have some idea where it might try to come down. Because if you take a look at the enemy, if they have multiple rows, they have all these ranks and flanks of their units there, they're not going to want to put this thing behind a unit, most likely, unless it can leapfrog in front of them. And it's a short move, so it's going to have a hard time leapfrogging. So most likely when you look, you're going to be looking for an open lane. Now, they could always come in from the side, but pay attention to where they put their units. If their units are right along the flank, they're not going to want to come in the flank if they'd have to come behind them, because again, you might have to spend 2 turns getting in front, or really reposition this one unit really far out of the way. So look for open lanes, give yourself that as an idea of where they should come in, and put some, or maneuver as you go along, some cheaper units into those lanes. And then when this monsters start coming out, push towards that. Maybe it's because you're now towards objectives, so try to grab some objectives closer to their end, whatever you may have to do. Or if they just put it down, okay, here it is, it's pointing or trying to get towards some of my juicier units that it wants. Okay, I have this other unit there. Try to push them in the way. You probably have a couple things that are at least 3-block stands. Try to put one of your 3-block stands towards it. Yes, it very well might take them down. But if you can play your cards right and position well, they're not going to really get a lot of distance out of it. And they're going to be taking something down that's worth less points. You might be able to do some damage back if they don't take you out entirely. And otherwise, you've slowed down that turn. There would be turns they would rather move twice, or theoretically 3 times in the right conditions. They'd rather move twice to be able to get closer to the things they actually want to be hitting, want to be getting through, want to be causing the damage to. If you're a person who runs just big, larger blocks, or runs very heavy things, or you're, say, a city states where you tend to run more both larger units or heavier units, heavier hitters or minotaurs, things like that. You're thinking about, 100 kingdoms. You're talking about your different higher or more damaging type knights and all of that. In those cases, your goal is you need to be charging them. Figure out how many units you think you need to throw at it to take it down and try to do exactly that. With the right unit, you might be able to do most of it with one. I think it would be very tough to get all of it in one, but with right types of units, I think you could do quite a bit of it with one, which means you probably want at least 2 units to kind of go into it. What you don't want to be drawn into is a long protracted battle, because you're not really going to have those. The amount of attacks and the tramples means that unless your saves are exceptionally good, you're going to start taking a lot of casualties through attrition. So maybe in 2 rounds you might be able to take it out, but if they can double activate, maybe they take you down first instead. So I think if you're going to try and deal with them and deal damage, and you didn't shoot some damage into them early, I think you absolutely need to take something big and hit them with it. You need to cripple them a lot. And then because of how big they are, you can easily shoot over them to try to finish them out. If you happen to have a wizard there, you can put some magic into it to maybe do the last little bit. I know, at least for me, that's one of my favorite things, is being able to get into with one of my units and then have an Archimandrite, be able to do damage, armor piercing 1 attacks into it, or there's obviously tons of other spells depending on what you're looking at. If you're Dweghom, I think you have a much better time because you have very good defenses, you have hardened, you have all those sorts of rules. You can cast good magic into them. You have good ranged attacks, a bit shorter range, but good ranged attacks. Your Dragon Slayers would do really great against these because they also have the good defense to be able to make it through. They have the good resolve to help make it through. So I think depending on the army you're in, depends on which one you do. If you're running Spires, I would probably do much more in terms of distraction. Try to put smaller units off to the side on objectives where this thing is somewhat near. So maybe it wants to divert over there. Okay, you'll divert. I'll score points for a turn. You'll come in. Maybe you'll take out that unit. But now you're way over there. And you have 300, maybe 400 points if you put a character on it over there on the side. So I can then take a larger portion of my army to start reducing yours. And by the time you come over, because of your general moves and maybe badly positioned, it's going to take several turns. Now I'm hopefully up in enough points where I'm either in a good position, or now I can start throwing something at it because I have the resource to be able to do so. Those are some of my thoughts. Obviously, see what works for you. Try different things on both sides. If you tried using them, anything like that, put it in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube, because I am curious to see what people have done with them and what sort of plans and what they've seen for what's worked well. Do you enjoy running them? Do they work well for you? Do they do a lot? Do you find them a hindrance or a help in your army? Sometimes these big cool models, we put them on the board because they look awesome. We spend a lot of money on them, spend a lot of time painting them and all, and they just don't perform. And I'm really curious to see if these guys perform for you as well as I think they can. At least as better than some of these monsters that are out there in the game right now. All right, I promise a shorter video. It's only mildly shorter than some of the other ones, but I tend to talk for long periods of time because it's what I do for a living. So, as I said, if you run any of these, anything like that, let us know all about it. Would love to hear it. Love to hear everything you have to say about it. For other ideas related to Conquest or any other game system, put them in the comments of things that you would like to see when I have discussions on. I hope for some of these to have some of the other guys on, but for right now, it's convenient when I can record them because I can record them when no one else happens to be around. But I would like to get some of them more on, especially when I start doing more battle reports, all that kind of stuff. I talked in the other video, things we have coming up soon. Big things we have coming up soon is Legion Imperialis. As soon as that drops, we're going to start getting some stuff out around about that because Dan and I at least both really like Epic and the old Space Marine game and all those sorts of things. So we want to play some of that and just give our impressions and have some fun with it at a smaller scale. Especially because I don't really play any other very small scale games currently. All right, for next thing, like I said, 100 Kingdoms, I think it's going to be the next for the faction deep dive. And if you like the idea of going through individual units, things like that, or units as pairs and all, let me know because I can easily go back and start discussing those. I'd probably go back more towards Old Dominion because I can do that without any prep work for this. I tried to go through and really look things over and try to come up with what my impressions were, but I'll be honest, I haven't played them. So all of mine is more the theory, and sometimes the practice is a little bit different. All right, well, on behalf of everyone here then at the show, have some good hobbying and some great gaming.